So, hello, my name is Matthew.
I'm Jamie Koki.
I'm Rutameleri.
And I'm Mr.
And today, our presentation is to talk about how we will produce enough food to feed 10,000 people on Mars. So, and have a varied diet. So, the topics that we will talk about would be the unique Martian cuisine that Martians would be eating on Mars, how we will make a balanced Martian diet and the nutritional value of the foods we're going to bring to Mars, and why we put animals to Mars and what they will do for us, what kind of farming methods we would use on Mars, how we would store and cook this food that we produce, and the natural tools that we'll use, like bacteria, and of course the statistics, which we have very big numbers for. Oh, and just a note, we calculated the food for 11,000 people to account for crop shortages and, growth of the colony over time. So, our main objective was, like I said, to feed 10,000 people in a Mars colony in 2075. So we assumed that the farming methods and that we use will be sufficiently developed, and also that GMOs, in other words, genetically modified organisms, would be a staple of food on Earth and on Mars. We also had to find the sufficient how many nutrients for a balanced diet and a diverse and Earth-like diet for moral reasons, like mental health, and also as for nutritional value. And we also had to feed 10,000 people with as little water as possible, with as little space as possible, and with very small amount of resources. So we really had to think of what we had to do there. And actually, every other team hated us because the amount of resources we actually needed to make this possible.
So, what kind of food would you expect? What kind of food would you expect to eat on Mars? You can show
Vegan.
Huh?
Vegan.
A vegan diet. Anyone else? Yeah? Fish. Okay, fish. Mostly people would probably expect to be swallowing some pills that would provide them with the nutrients that they need to survive, or maybe even, I don't know, some dry piece of cardboard looking the nutrient-filled packaged product. But we have some good news for you. Wait. Okay. Technology in a moment. Please start the slideshow.
Where's the tech group?
Please start the slideshow. Just put it again.
Don't send him to Mars, huh?
If I were to go to Mars, I could be a botanist, so I wouldn't be playing for this technology.
Bottom right.
Yeah, that's it.
There we go. Yep.
Plastic.
How many would be expecting, for example, Jibanians?
We'd also have honey, which we'll explain later.
We can have brownies. We can also have waffles.
And
on Mars, obviously, we need to eat something, obviously. We will be eating a balanced diet, which consists of taking an intake of all the 6 essential nutrients, which is divided into macronutrients and micronutrients. The macronutrients are carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, and the micronutrients are vitamins and minerals. Now, we made sure that all of these nutrients were going to be provided to us when we eventually started to produce and grow our food on Mars. So for carbohydrates, we had decided to take this source of carbohydrates with us to Mars. Wheat is something that we have decided to take because it can grow very fast. It is a staple with lots of proteins. Basically, a lot of things can be made from wheat, so it is very you can make a variety of things with it. It's high protein, and we can create anything basically with it. Now, sweet potatoes. We decided to take sweet potatoes because it is more nutritionally dense than normal potatoes. It is also potatoes, and it also grows quickly. Quinoa, it will provide us with magnesium and iron. It's also efficient in growth, and it's considered a superfood. And carrots will provide us with vitamin A, C, and antioxidants, and it will grow well. Now, all of these will grow very well in the methods that we have decided to use, where we will grow our plants.
Now, we have the most variety by far when it comes to specific foods in the food group with protein. Now, we chose to take up fish, specifically carp, because they are very dense in omega-3 fatty and calcium, as well as they're very resilient fish and can adapt to a lot of conditions. We chose to take chickens, as mentioned previously, not only as they are a staple of cuisine in pretty much everywhere, but they also produce eggs, which are also considered a superfood. Brine shrimp were chosen as they are easy to grow and they're fast to grow. They're nutrient dense and take up very minimal resources. And we should also take up goats, not only for their meat, as well as for non-meat animal products such as wool and milk. And lastly, for animal-based protein, taking mealworms as they are protein dense, they can feed other animals, and they require very little space to grow and thrive. We also chose some plant-based protein, such as kidney beans, as they are high in fiber and iron. All of them are high in fiber and iron, as well as they are very shelf stable, meaning they can be stored for long periods of time. Lentils are fast-growing, and they're very rich in numerous B vitamins. Spinach is also considered a superfood. It has high amounts of calcium and numerous vitamins that cannot be getting from any other food on Mars, and chickpeas for their versatility.
Now, for some fancy diet, we have this list that you can see over there. We decided to take that same carb we were talking about earlier and extract its fish oil for the omega-3 that we need. And we also have sunflowers in our garden fields with bees, so we have honey and oil. We have the goat milk that we got from the goats. They're very efficient. We ignore the first one. The milk is very easy to digest. It's better than the milk that you get from cows. Soybeans are amazing foods. You can make milk, tofu, oil, and even feed them to animals. They also have nitrogen-fixing bacteria that was mentioned in some other groups that might help us get some nutrients that will be used in later purposes. Now, for some other things that you might need that didn't fit into the rest of the tables. Fungi, they grow everywhere. You don't need to do much with them. They don't even need sunlight, so you can stuff them under some grass and they'll be okay. Lichen, we don't eat them, but we'll plant them everywhere, make it look nice, and get some oxygen out of it. Herbs will be planted in people's homes with regolith that will be processed, as some earlier groups explained, and you can choose what herbs you get to grow in your own home for your own culture and preferences. We also have yeast that isn't listed on the slideshow, but it will be produced for some things like bread, cakes, and a surprise. We also have chocolate, as we mentioned earlier. We have some trees, which we'll be using. I see Malcolm over there in the back, very happy about it. We'll be producing quite rarely, but we have our first ever Earth bars on Mars that we'll be presenting to our panel today.
Earth bars. Earth bars.
This is advertising. This is how we get our sponsorships for the 12 billion people.
Like an earth bar, specially made.
We also have honey in our honeybee farms. Honey will be quite a luxury, but we make sure to have provided to every single person that will be inhabiting Mars at that moment, which is to grow. And this will be a source of sugar that we need in our diets. Also, one more thing. You're not just going to be drinking urine from goats. For the adults.
So, we will be making beer using the yeast that we will produce. It is made by fermented yeast and some carbon dioxide and also some flavorings. So you will have as much beer as you want.
Now, you might be wondering how and why these specific animals got a nutritional value. So, the fish will be inhabiting aquaponics and water tubes respectively, and will be living off of insects and algae, as will the brine shrimp. The chickens and the goats, along with their nutritional value, they eat minimal food, and you pretty much give them anything, and they will eat it. They will be living underground, as previously. Their urine will be collected and recycled to gain as much out of it as we can. And as I mentioned, they will also be eating the mealworms that we will be eating. Now, by insects, we do mean mealworms. They're very low maintenance, and with minimal supplies, they can generate high yields. They grow fast, and as I said previously, they can feed other animals. Now, we do have bees, which will be explained by Matthew.
Now, the bees are kind of my little brain project that I had come up with, and everyone's very skeptical of it, but I managed to make it work somehow. The bees will, as you know, on Earth, bees are very important for the ecosystem. They pollinate, which will be very important for our plants as well on Mars, as it will induce genetic diversity for the plants, which means any mutations that happen to our plants that might be beneficial will spread to other plants, even if we don't notice them at first. And honey production, which honey is a superfood, it's extremely nutritious, it does not go bad, and it can be stored indefinitely. But obviously, it's on Mars, we can't get too many bees, because then we have so much land, it would be impossible. So we get 100 beehives with 500 bees in total, 500 million bees, 5 million bees in total, and it would, in a perfect scenario, it would produce 10,000 kilograms of honey, in a perfect scenario. And in a perfect scenario, each person would get around 75 grams per month, and 1,000 kilograms of that honey would be stored for later use. On Mars, we have the problem. You cannot use soil for industrial level farming, since soil farming on Earth might be the most efficient since we have soil everywhere. But on Mars, and also lots of water, but on Mars there's not as much water, and the soil is kind of toxic, which means we can't exactly use it, and it needs to be lots of energy to make it, plantable. So we have to use aquaponics, aeroponics, and homegrown plants, which I will explain later on. Aquaponics is basically a system. I'll explain in the next slide. The aquaponics would be around 20 hectares. So, with actual 20 hectares with actual fish. The other 20 hectares would be hydroponics. The other 2 hectares would be hydroponics. We would need around 200,000 meters cubed of water, assuming each container is a meter in depth, and would have around, each fish would be harvested with around 2 kilograms, and it's a very big range because we don't exactly have fish on Mars or any other planet, so we'd have around 200,000 to 400 fish. They would need 2,880 kilograms of oxygen daily, which I'll explain in the numbers slide, which would be no problem to supply with. Aquaponics is a system where basically the fish are fed our mealworms. They will eat those mealworms, digest them, and produce waste, like all animals. That waste for them is toxic. If they stay in that waste for too long, they'll die. So some smart person, I don't know how long ago, had to come up with a system where the plants will pump the water up to the plants, and the plants will absorb those toxic nutrient waste. To them, it's beneficial for their survival, and it will filter it. They'll also drink the water, and to filter it and then give them minerals to the fish to keep the water fresh and filtered. We will also be using an aeroponics system. It is much more efficient than aquaponics and hydroponics, since it uses minimal water, and water, as you will see, is going to be a very big problem. Basically, aeroponics, what it does is it uses a water pump and a very nutrient-dense solution, which will then have mist mussels, which will spray the nutrient-dense solution up onto the roots of the plants, which they will absorb and then, grow. This is I think it uses 95% less water than hydroponics and much less water than soil farming. And it also actually has greater yields in total compared to any other form of farming that we have developed till now. And also, any plant can be grown using aeroponics. So we have no problem producing food with these methods.
Now, we're going to have excess food, as do we on Earth. We can have little biocontainers that we'll send off for recycling, but there are some other methods. We can preserve a bunch of stuff in honey that we have quite a bit of. We can freeze, just by placing it outside, covering it from radiation. You can dry it. You can also vacuum seal it. Again, by just placing it outside, the atmospheric pressure will do it itself. You can freeze dry it and get some water that is very precious. You can can it, but that's limited due to supplies. And you can also ferment it using the beer.
Okay, so now we've decided how we're going to get the animals. Now we need to find a way how to cook the food. So, basically, we can do no barbecues because it doesn't be a problem. We can use electric heat that will be supplied by energy. So we can use stovetops which were fueled by induction cooking. We can fry stuff using our sunflower oil. We can roast using electric ovens. Broiling and boiling are also an option, and air frying. Now this will just basically change the texture of the food. It won't really do anything to the nutritive value unless you're really doing something.
Now, regarding the numerical statistics, non-soil-based farming will take up 110 hectares, of which 80% will go to the aeroponic farms and the rest to aquaponic farms. As the providing infrastructure group, we have 8 hectares of flower gardens for the bees to pollinate and thrive in. We estimate that we would use and recycle around 50 million liters of total volume of water a year. But just in case there's to make up for any waste that could occur, we hope to bring about 5 million liters a year for top-ups. The total energy consumption of all of our farms is around 5.7 terawatt hours a year. Regarding the specific numbers for the animals, we have about 2,500 hens and 250 roosters of the Australorp variant. And for the goats, they're much less numerous, just 700, of which 150 are cashmere goats for their wool, and the remaining are tiger goats for their milk. We also hope to bring around 300,000 carp for the fish.
Now this is where like I said before, the soil, this will be very good in the home potting soil. On Earth we have many bacteria. Some of them are actually they exist, these actually exist. We have, on Mars, the regolith has something called perchlorides, which is basically a toxic substance which kills all life, except for these things, because they evolved to eat it. Basically, these bacteria, Azospira swirlum, wood, and Deinococcus radioturans, which is actually a genetically modified organism to be extremely radiation resistant, which when the colony eventually grows to lots of people, and we have an abundance of water, it could be used to industrially detoxify the soil, the regoliths. We also need nitrogen-fixing bacteria, since there is nitrites in the soil on Mars, but those will be used up pretty quickly by plants. So like on how, like in Earth, we have crop rotation. If we eventually, when we go big enough, would use nitrogen-fixing bacteria in soybeans, they will have a symbiotic relationship where the soybeans and the roots have nodules filled with this bacteria that seep nitrites into the soil, which are called rhizobia. We also have cyanobacteria. I looked into this a bit. It's very interesting. Cyanobacteria are basically also known as blue-green algae. They have capabilities of nitrogen fixation, like I said, for the soybean bacteria. They have carbon fixation, which would be useful for the plant's growth as well. And they also have very high perchlorate tolerance, some species, which would be useful for when we need to very quickly fertilize soil over a very short amount of time. Water and oxygen, these are some of the two most important things for life on Earth. Without these, most life would not exist. So, you know, we needed a lot of it. Oxygen, we didn't need that much because most of our plants produced it. Now it's where like crazy numbers come in. We need just for the colony-wide algae farm, which exists nowadays on a smaller scale, would be like glass tanks filled with spirulina algae, which is a very, very nutritious algae. They would need around a total volume of around 7.5 million liters at first for around 20 hectares. And they will produce enough oxygen for around 4,400 people, if I remember correctly. We need a lot of water for the aeroponics and aquaponics, about 45 million liters. This is a total volume, so it wouldn't be every year a one-time deposit of 45 million liters or a slow growth of water over time. This would produce around 5,500 metric tons of oxygen annually. All our farm systems combined to produce this amount of oxygen, which is more than enough for 10,000 people, all animals would ever need. In total, we would need 5.2 million liters of water as a total volume. And again, 5 million liters would need to be resupplied annually due to like, it won't be a fully perfect closed-loop system. Some water would be lost somehow. So we calculated around 5 million liters to be resupplied annually. We had said 10,000 people only need 2,280 metric tons of oxygen in a year. Or every day, I don't remember, but I think it's every day. And which means we produce more than enough oxygen than we ever really need. The amount of oxygen we produce, if we don't use the ventilation system, would would increase the oxygen percentage in the atmosphere of it. On Earth, it's around 21%. But in the colony, if we don't get rid of the excess oxygen, it would be around 23%.
Now, as you may or may not know, there is water on Mars. So we're using that. But we're wondering, how and how much? When we have this graph to show, we did all the calculations by magnitudes of 10, and we did 7 of them. Now, however, in the colony, we're only going to be using the last two at an actual scale. So, assuming we'll be able to, obviously, first explain how, which we're going to be doing them from the ice caps, because we're going to be into them, and then we're going to be melting them. At a basis of 100,000 kilograms of ice melted a day, it would take us about a year and a half to reach the amount of water in kilograms that we need over a time span of about 1.4 years, which will be done probably before the mass development of the colony begins, which will need around just under 600 kilowatts of power to melt. There's also likelihood we're going to be doing this at 10 times the ice melted, which will obviously require 10 times the power, but will take 10 times less.
Now, a common misconception. We don't get most of our oxygen from trees. Well, no, we have to thank algae for that. Now, thanks to multiple people that have explained and mentioned this before, we're going to have big walls that have algae on them. Now we're planning to maybe insert some fish into them, but this is a later thinking process. We're going to have 20 hectares of these walls that will provide our oxygen, and they'll need 45 million liters of water. Now, don't worry, this will be recycled, except for that 5 million you mentioned earlier, so this will be a one-time thing. It will produce 1,150 tons of oxygen per year, and will support around 4,000 people out of the 10,000 we have, but the rest will survive.
Okay, so a little overview. So, the space that we needed in total to basically function our little farm is 190.26 hectares of land. Which, again, to remind you, is going to feed 11,000 people, which is in mind for 11,000 people, but it feeds 10,000 people. Now, as we said before, water will be supplied from the ice caps available on Mars, and for oxygen, 2,280 metric tons of oxygen will be needed daily, and will be provided by the algae and the plants that we have planted. So, don't forget, on Mars you won't be eating pieces of cardboard or pills or very bland stuff. You will be eating healthy, fun food.